Optionals in a nutshell. Optionals are another option instead of using null, and here is why. With a traditional variable you have a reference. It's either to a value or it's to a null value, so it's a null pointer, and it can be replaced with something like this. You have the string value, and on the string value itself you can call the dot length, and that's all fine. But when the variable points towards the null, you have null dot length, and length is not a method on null, so it gives a null pointer exception. Very simple, very common, and those constructions are why in a lot of applications you need a bunch of if statements around it to check if there is a value before you can call methods on it. Otherwise you have the null pointer exceptions in your code, and they are quite a pain to debug. There's another way, and it's the optional. It's pretty much like a box. It is an empty box, or there's something in the box, but there is always a box, so there is no null box. Here are some methods you use most of the time, let's say 80%. I have two variables, and let's assume that those could be null. Right now they have a value, but they could be null as they are strings. And this is how you can create an optional. You have an optional of type, and then you can call the optional class dot of nullable, and then you can put a variable inside here. It can have a value or null. If it is null, then it will be replaced with a status optional empty. We will get there in a minute. How you can get the value? Let's quick back. Optional empty. So you have an empty box. So it's still a box. It's an optional, but it is empty. But more on that later, like I said. How do you get a value out of the box? You have a couple of options. You can call the or else get. And if the box is not empty, you get the value. If the box is empty, you can give it a supplier that gives the value that you would like to have instead. So it's empty, or you have if it is empty, you have the no name instead of the value that I put in. You have the or else throws, so it gets the value. If there is no value, then it throws an exception. You can give your own exception with it. If you leave the brackets empty, it has by default the no switch element exception. It's still a runtime exception, so your application will crash just like with the null pointer exception, but it's a little bit more specific, you might say, but still try to avoid it. How you can work with values? Well, there is this if present, and you can have, and if the value is present, you can use it here in a lambda expression, just like you would in other situations. You can also have the if present or else, so you have the lambda expression, or you can have a runnable that you can supply here. This one can also throw an exception if you like. You can mutate the data like so. You have the optional. You can filter on it just like in streams, but it is not a stream. This one returns an optional, so it's always an optional that those return, except for this one. But those four all return optionals. So this one you could use inside the filter, for example. So you can filter on the value inside the box. If the value inside of the box it passes the expression here, you can continue with the value. Otherwise, it will be an empty optional that it passes on. You can use the or in this situation, and if there is if this value is empty, like we just mentioned, then you can give another optional that will be replacing it from here on. You can use the map function. So here you have an optional that is contains a string value. When you map it, you can continue with it as a integer value. It's still, again, an optional. You can have the flat map. Here is a lazy example, but I couldn't think of anything better. But if you have an optional of an optional, so a nested optional, a box in a box, that's so to say, then you can flat map it to just one optional wrapper around it. The equals checks the contents of the box. And you can always use the stream method as well, so you can stream on optionals. There are some methods that you use maybe 20% of the time. That's the optional empty. You create a new empty box. The optional of. This one looks like you would use it quite often, but if the value in here is null, then you get a null pointer exception. So defeats the purpose of using optionals, if you ask me. So only use optional of when you are really, really sure that the value is not null. Otherwise, use the of nullable. So it will be empty or has a value. Then we have optional if present and optional is empty. Those check if there is a value in the box or if the box is empty. It returns a boolean. Quite simple. You probably use this mainly when you are working within an if statement, but I try to not use them too much. Otherwise, you will be using them as if they are null checks, and you don't want to check if they are null. You want to operate them with logic like this or with those two. And at last we have the optional get. It gets the value that's inside, but if the optional is empty, it can throw a null pointer. And we have the optional or else. It's a simple one. It's quite same as the or else get that we saw earlier, but this one is not lazy evaluated. So here it's fine because it's just a string value in here. But if this goes to a method, it eagerly calls that method to get the value to store it in the situation. So even if the optional is not empty, it still calls the method over here. So that's why I say this is, you should use this less often than the or else get, because this one is lazy evaluated. So this one only calls the supplier when the optional itself is empty. So this is just optionals in a nutshell. There's more to talk about and more to show you, but that will be in another video. This code will be available on my GitHub. Just check it out. Have fun.